In the entirety of the U.S., there are plentiful national parks, a vast, untouched wilderness. I'm sure you've seen this picture of the U.S. cave systems, along with many 411 missing persons cases. Hope you see the correlation. With as much as 90,000 missing people at any given time, it does raise some concern. Unfortunately, the only thing that is certain is uncertainty in this vast world of unknown hidden knowledge.
It was Father's Day weekend, 1969. 6-year-old Dennis Martin was at a Smoky Mountains National Park with his brother, father, and grandfather. They camped out for the night, and the next day, a man approached Mr. Martin, asking if his sons wanted to play with his kids. Since they were about the same age, Dennis's father agreed, and the children started a big game of hide and seek. Dennis's father kept his eyes on his son from a distance. Dennis hid behind a tree, and when the other kids jumped to reveal themselves, Dennis didn't. His father got up, ran over to see where he had last seen his son, and he was gone. The Appalachian Trail was nearby, so he ran at full speed for 2 miles, yelling and calling for Dennis, but he couldn't find his son. They called park rangers and spent all night looking for him. The search for Dennis Martin became massive. The FBI, Green Berets, park rangers, and local volunteers searched for 6 weeks. The only thing they found belonging to Dennis was 1 shoe and 1 sock. They never found a body. Paulides conducted interviews and dug through files with testimonies. The Key family had been camping in the park the same weekend, and they asked park rangers where they could go see the bears. They were told where to go, and when they arrived, they reported hearing a scream. The child pointed at the top of the hill, saying that he saw a bear. The father said it looked more like a scary-looking, wild, hairy mountain man, dodging behind trees while carrying something over its shoulder. In July 2015, Dr. Coons and his girlfriend, Jessica Michael, were on a camping trip with their 2-year-old son, Dr. Jr. They brought along Jessica's grandfather and a family friend named Isaac Renwand. The campsite was extremely remote, on the edge of the Rocky Mountain National Park. There was only one dirt road leading to the area where they parked their trailer and car. The morning after their arrival, Jessica, Dr. and Dr. Jr. all went to the nearby town to run some errands. When they came back to the campsite, Renwand was holding a large fish. He said he caught it in a nearby river. Jessica and Dr. Sr. asked to see where he caught the fish, so they began to follow him with their son. The little boy suddenly decided he wanted to go get candy from his grandfather. They allowed him to walk by himself back to the campsite, which was only a few yards away. The grandfather confirmed that little Dr. returned safely to him, that he was watching over him, but in the blink of an eye, the toddler was gone. During an interview, the parents explained that they searched for the boy for about 20 minutes before trying to call 911. There was no cell phone service at the campsite, so they had to drive down the road until they could get a complete call. The search party helped them comb the area for several days with no sign of a scent or tracks. Helicopters with heat tracking cameras flew over the area as well. A 2-year-old should not have been able to go very far. Everyone was baffled. Where was Dr. Coons? Years later, the case is still unsolved. Many in the general public believe that Dr's parents are suspects, and there was a public outcry to have them tried for murder. However, there is no evidence that they actually killed their son. In 1952, a 2-year-old boy named Keith Parkins went missing from his home in Riddler, Oregon, in the middle of the winter. He'd been playing outside with his jacket on, but he was far from equipped to spend the night outside alone. His family and local search party looked for him immediately. They could follow his tiny footprints up to the point before they completely stopped. There were no other animal or adult tracks nearby. 19 hours later, they found Keith. He was about 15 miles away. He had taken his jacket off and was lying face down in the snow on a frozen pond. Keith was alive. When they asked him why he had run away and how he survived, he said he didn't remember. A survival expert named Les Stroud filmed a segment of the 411 Missing documentary to demonstrate just how impossible it would have been for 2-year-old Keith to walk so far on his own, especially at night. To this day, no one is sure exactly how Keith survived the night, and we may never know. In 2014, a medical doctor named James McGrogan went on a split snowboard trip with his friends in Vail, Colorado. Not many people have heard of the split snowboarding. This is a sport that's a lot like cross-country skiing or hiking in snowshoes. He came prepared with a cell phone and a satellite GPS system. He was much faster than his friends, so he said that he would wait for them at the next stop. They lost sight of him and never saw him at any of the stops along the trail. When the search team went looking for him, they found no tracks in the snow that veered off the trail, so they had no idea where he could possibly have gone. 5 days later, his body was discovered 4.5 miles away, as the crows fly, which was more like a 14-mile hike, as he would have to climb up mountains in order to get there. His body was found by 2 hikers at the bottom of a frozen waterfall. The search party had gone over that area multiple times before, but had never seen him until that day. McGrogan was mangled in a strange position. His skull was crushed, as if he had fallen from the sky. He was still wearing the full ski outfit and helmet, but there were no boots on his feet, and he'd also taken off his gloves. The search and rescue team later found his discarded split snowboard, but they never found his boots. His cell phone and GPS were still working, and he had packed a backup battery as well. They tested the area where he was found, and there was a cell phone signal, yet he never called anyone for help. The police deemed this an accidental death and closed the case. In February 1977, a 24-year-old man named Stephen Kubacki was cross-country skiing through the snow near Lake Michigan. Once he reached the edge of the lake, he took his skis off to sit down and rest. When he got up to leave, his own tracks were gone, and he became lost. The last thing he remembers was walking through the snow, feeling numb and exhausted. He blacked out. In the blink of an eye, it was spring. He was lying in a grassy field in the middle of a forest, wearing clothes that weren't his. Sitting next to him was a stranger's backpack containing running shoes and glasses that did not belong to him either. He hiked to the nearest town and asked a local resident where he was. They told him he was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 700 miles away from where he had been skiing. His aunt and father lived in Pittsfield. So he knocked on his aunt's door. His family was in shock, hugging him and asking where he had been. Kubacki had been missing for 14 months. When Kubacki had first gone missing, the search team found his poles and skis at the edge of the lake. There was only one set of his footprints leading towards the water, but none walking away. They could only assume he had drowned himself in the freezing lake. He had been missing for so long, everyone assumed he must be dead. The official explanation is that he had amnesia, and that he was wandering in a fugue state, but even doctors are baffled by this case. It's incredibly rare for someone to lose their memory of such a large chunk of time, and it still leaves so many unanswered questions. The story was included in a psychology case study in a book about amnesia, but even experts have been able to figure out what actually happened. Kubacki had already earned a degree in linguistics before he went missing, so he was so fascinated by his own case that he went on to earn his PhD in psychology. He wanted answers about his own disappearance, and yet he still couldn't find them. Solving the mystery of his missing year became an obsession, and he wanted to publish a book called Metamathematical Foundations of Existence, Gödel, Quantum, God, and Beyond. In it, he writes about the possibility of alternate universes. In 1981, an 84-year-old man named Maurice Demetez went topaz hunting with his friend David McSweeney. Demetez had a PhD in theology, and in the 70s, he had several publications that he believed the Antichrist was coming. He wrote that the devil would appear as a political, religious, commercial autocrat of the world. They drove to Pike National Forest in Colorado. Once they were in the park, they had to drive 16 miles down a dirt road until they reached a spot called Topaz Point. Native Americans claimed it was haunted by evil spirits. Early settlers called this place the Devil's Head, which was a very interesting coincidence considering his theological background. Maurice could barely walk because he had bad knees. He needed David to help him down a small hill to go to a sandy digging spot in the forest. When it was time to leave, David walked to Maurice's digging spot to say that they would go in about 10 minutes. He went back to his own digging site 150 yards away to clean up his tools. But when David returned to Maurice's spot, the elderly man was gone. With his bad knees, it would have been impossible for Maurice to climb up the hill on his own, and he couldn't have gone far into the forest. Yet, he was gone. He honked the horn, called for him, and searched for a long time. McSweeney flagged down a nearby car and asked him to find the police. While he continued the search, the local authorities searched for 5 days, and yet they never found any evidence. The police closed the case, claiming that they did all they could. Demetez's wife sent a letter to the governor of Colorado to reopen the case, and she never received a reply. After Paulides created a mini-documentary about the case for Missing 411, pointing out that there had been a cluster of similar disappearances in Devil's Head. After premiering the mini-document, the police reopened the Maurice Demetez case over 30 years after the disappearance. In February 2018, a Canadian man named Danny Paulides was on a ski trip with his friends in New York. It was around 2:00 p.m., and they had been skiing for hours. They were getting ready to go into the lodge, and Danny said that he wanted to go on one more run down the mountain before their lunch break. By 4:00 p.m., Danny was failing to return any calls or texts, and their friends were concerned. They began searching for him, and after being unable to find him, they told the employees at the lodge that he went missing. A team of 130 people scoured the mountain without finding him. After days later, Danny's wife received a phone call. She didn't recognize the number, and it sounded far away and staticky. It was Danny's voice. He was incoherent and confused, and then hung up the phone. She called the number back and pleaded to him to call 911 for help, so he did. He had no idea where he was, and he had just described his surroundings. When the paramedics finally found him, he was still wearing all his ski gear and in need of medical assistance. He was holding a brand new iPhone, and someone had cut his hair. Somehow he ended up in Sacramento, California, at the airport terminal car rental depot. He was 3,000 miles away from where he had disappeared. He couldn't remember how he got there, and he had no idea what day it was. When he learned where he was and how long people had been looking for him, he got very overwhelmed and emotional. The leading theory is that he was kidnapped in the back of a big rig truck, but no proof has ever been surfaced.